It was a calm evening, and Ren Reeves was enjoying a quiet stroll through his neighborhood. The city buzzed faintly in the distance, but here, on the quieter streets, it felt like a rare moment of peace. He adjusted the scarf around his neck and paused to take in the cool air. That's when he heard it. A sharp, desperate meow cutting through the silence. Ren turned his head toward the sound. It came from above. He scanned the row of buildings until his eyes settled on a small, furry silhouette perched precariously on the edge of a rooftop. The cat looked down at him, its bright green eyes wide with a mix of fear and urgency. "Hang on, little guy," Ren muttered to himself, already looking for a way up. A fire escape ladder caught his attention. He jogged over and tested it with his hands. It seemed sturdy enough. Without wasting time, he climbed up, his boots clanging softly against the metal steps. The cat didn't move, but its cries grew louder as he approached, like it was trying to communicate something. Reaching the top, Ren crouched and extended his hand. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help," he said in a soothing tone. But instead of backing away or letting him pick it up, the cat darted further across the roof, its movements sharp and deliberate. It wasn't just scared, it was guarding something. Ren frowned, watching the small creature pace around a particular spot near the center of the roof. "What's going on here?" he murmured, stepping closer. The cat hissed briefly, then meowed again, this time pawing at a loose tile. It wasn't running away, it was pointing at something. Curiosity got the better of him. Ren knelt beside the cat and brushed away some of the dirt and debris covering the tile. It wobbled under his touch, loose and uneven. With a careful tug, he lifted the tile, revealing a small hollow space beneath. Inside was a metal box, its surface covered in odd, engraved symbols. It was locked tight, and even in the dim light, Ren could see it wasn't something you'd find in an ordinary home. "What are you hiding, huh?" Ren muttered, glancing at the cat. The animal sat back on its haunches, watching him intently, its tail flicking against the ground. Ren picked up the box, feeling its weight in his hands. It was heavier than it looked, and cold to the touch. He examined the engravings, strange, cryptic patterns that didn't make much sense. Where did this come from? He wondered aloud, glancing at the cat again. The animal tilted its head as if urging him to figure it out. He decided not to open it there. The rooftop wasn't exactly the safest or most private place to examine something so peculiar. As he stood, the cat followed him closely, weaving between his legs. "Looks like you're coming with me," Ren said, giving the animal a small smile. "Fine, let's go." Carrying the box in one hand and carefully cradling the cat in the other, he climbed back down the fire escape. Once on solid ground, he set the cat down gently. "Go home, buddy," he said, but the cat didn't budge. Instead, it trotted after him as he started walking back to his house. Keanu's home was a cozy, modest place with just enough room for a man who liked his solitude. The cat slipped through the door as soon as he opened it, making itself comfortable on the couch as if it owned the place. "Well, make yourself at home," Ren said dryly, setting the metal box on the coffee table. He grabbed a flashlight and examined it more closely. The engravings were intricate, almost like a map, but not one he recognized. The lock was sturdy, with no visible keyhole, just a small indentation in the shape of a triangle. He leaned back and sighed. "What did I just get myself into?" he muttered, glancing at the cat. It was curled up now, but still watching him, its green eyes alert. Ren couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random rooftop find. The box, the cat's behavior, it all felt deliberate. For now, though, he decided to call it a night. Whatever the box was hiding could wait until morning. But as he turned off the lights and settled into bed, he couldn't ignore the nagging curiosity pulling at the edge of his thoughts. Morning light streamed through the windows as Ren Reeves stretched in his bed, his thoughts immediately drifting back to the strange box he had found the night before. It was still sitting on the coffee table, its cryptic engravings gleaming faintly under the soft light. The cat, however, was nowhere in sight. Ren walked over and picked up the box, turning it over in his hands again. It felt oddly warm now, as though it had absorbed some kind of energy overnight. "You're not just some random junk, are you?" he muttered to himself. He set it down and grabbed his phone to look up the symbols online, but a search brought up nothing even remotely similar. A soft meow broke the silence, and Ren looked up to see the cat sitting by the door, staring at him expectantly. "You're still here, huh?" he said, smirking. "All right, let's figure this out." He grabbed a cup of coffee and sat on the floor, the box in front of him. The cat padded over and sat beside him, its tail flicking rhythmically. Ren examined the box carefully, noting that the triangular indentation on the lock seemed out of place. It's like it needs a key or something specific to open it, he said aloud. The cat responded with a chirping meow, standing up and nudging his arm. Then it darted toward the door and pawed at it insistently. "What's up with you?" Wren asked, frowning. The cat glanced back at him, meowed again, and pawed the door harder. It wasn't just looking for a way out, it was urging him to follow. Against his better judgment, Wren grabbed the box and opened the door. The cat immediately bolted outside, stopping a few paces ahead and looking back to make sure he was coming. "This better be good," Wren muttered, locking the door behind him and jogging after the cat. The cat led him back to the rooftop where he had found it the previous night. Wren climbed the fire escape again, the box tucked under his arm, while the cat nimbly scaled the building with surprising agility. Once on the rooftop, the cat headed straight to the corner where the loose tile had been, pawing at a nearby gutter this time. Wren crouched down and peeked inside the gutter. At first he saw nothing but dirt and leaves, but then something glinted faintly in the sunlight. Using his fingers, he fished out a small rusted key. It was triangular, perfectly matching the indentation on the box. "Well, would you look at that?" Wren said, holding up the key. The cat meowed in approval, sitting back on its haunches like it had been waiting for this moment. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" He inserted the key into the box, and with a soft click, the lock released. The lid creaked open, revealing its contents, a folded map and a strange metallic object that looked like a shard of some larger mechanism. The object was sleek and polished, its surface covered in faint, glowing lines that pulsed softly like a heartbeat. "What the hell is this?" Wren murmured, carefully picking up the shard. The moment his fingers touched it, he felt a faint hum, like a low vibration running through his skin. It wasn't heavy, but it radiated a sense of importance, as though it wasn't meant to be handled lightly. The map was old, its edges frayed, but the markings were clear. A red X was drawn over a location on the outskirts of the city, near an industrial zone. There were no labels or landmarks, just coordinates scribbled in the corner. Wren folded the map and slipped it into his pocket. The shard, though, was harder to deal with. He didn't know what it was, but leaving it behind didn't feel like an option. He wrapped it in a piece of cloth and tucked it into his jacket. The cat meowed again, snapping Wren out of his thoughts. It was pacing near the edge of the rooftop, looking down at the street. Wren followed its gaze and froze. A black SUV was parked directly across from the building, its windows tinted. Two men in suits stood nearby, scanning the area with sharp, focused eyes. "Looks like we're not the only ones interested in this box," Wren whispered. The cat hissed softly, its fur bristling as if it could sense the danger. Wren crouched low, staying out of sight, and observed the men. They were speaking into earpieces, their body language tense. One of them gestured toward the fire escape. Keanu's heart raced. He wasn't sure who these people were, but their presence didn't feel friendly. He grabbed the box and the cat, holding the animal close as it squirmed slightly. "All right, buddy, we need to get out of here," he said, keeping his voice low. He climbed down the fire escape on the opposite side of the building, making sure to stay hidden from view. Once on the ground, he slipped into a nearby alley, his pulse pounding in his ears. The cat stayed quiet now, as though it understood the need for silence. Wren darted through the back streets, avoiding the main roads until he was confident he had lost any potential tail. By the time he reached his house, his muscles ached, and his breath was short. He locked the door behind him and set the box and the cat down on the couch. "Okay," he said, trying to steady himself. "This just got a lot more complicated." The cat meowed softly, curling up beside the box like a loyal guardian. Wren stared at it for a moment, then at the strange shard now resting on his table. Whatever this thing was, it had already drawn attention, and he had a feeling this was just the beginning. A soft meow broke the silence, and Wren looked up to see the cat sitting by the door, staring at him expectantly. "You're still here, huh?" he said, smirking. Wren Reeves sat on his couch, staring at the map spread out on the coffee table. The coordinates on the map marked a location in an industrial zone, far from the city's bustling core. The cat, now comfortably lounging beside the strange shard, looked up at him expectantly, as if waiting for his next move. "This is insane," Wren muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I should probably just hand this over to the authorities." But even as he said it, he knew he wouldn't. Something about the shard, the cat, and the men who had been watching him didn't sit right. If he turned this over without understanding it, he might never get the answers he needed. The cat stretched lazily, then hopped off the couch, pawing at the door. Wren chuckled dryly. "You're persistent, I'll give you that." He grabbed the map, wrapped the shard securely in cloth, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The box stayed behind. It felt safer to leave it out of sight. All right, let's see what this is about. The drive to the industrial zone was uneventful, but the quiet tension gnawed at Keanu. The roads became increasingly deserted as he approached the coordinates. Factories and warehouses lined the streets, their faded exteriors giving the area an abandoned, lifeless feel. Ren parked his car a few blocks away and continued on foot, the cat following closely. When he reached the marked location, he found a large, decrepit warehouse. The metal doors were rusted, and its windows were either broken or boarded up. At first glance, it looked like no one had been there in years, but Keanu's instincts told him otherwise. He tried one of the doors. It didn't budge. Circling the building, he found a side entrance partially hidden behind some overgrown bushes. With a bit of effort, he forced it open, the metal creaking loudly. He froze, listening for any sign that he'd been heard. When nothing happened, he slipped inside. The air inside the warehouse was stale, carrying the faint scent of oil and rust. Shafts of light from the broken windows illuminated the dusty interior. Ren moved cautiously, scanning the space for anything unusual. At first it seemed empty, just a large open area filled with discarded machinery and old crates. But then he spotted a door at the far end slightly ajar. The cat darted ahead, as if it already knew where to go. "You really don't waste time, do you?" Ren whispered, following it. He pushed the door open and found a narrow staircase leading down. The further he descended, the colder the air became. It was a stark contrast to the warm, sunlit world above. At the bottom of the stairs, he discovered a hidden room. It was starkly different from the rest of the warehouse, clean, well-maintained, and filled with advanced equipment that hummed faintly. Rows of computers lined one wall, their screens displaying streams of encrypted data. The other walls were covered in old blueprints and documents pinned to corkboards. Keanu's eyes were drawn to a metal table in the center of the room. On it lay various objects that resembled the shard he had brought with him. Some were broken, others incomplete, but all were etched with the same glowing lines. "This is next-level stuff," Renan muttered, carefully setting the shard beside the others. It fit perfectly with one of the broken pieces, as if it was part of a larger mechanism. He didn't touch it again. Something about it felt too powerful to handle carelessly. Among the documents on the corkboards, one caught his attention. It was a schematic labeled the Sentinel Core, accompanied by notes that described its purpose. According to the notes, the core was an ancient energy source capable of either stabilizing entire power grids or unleashing devastating destruction, depending on how it was used. Keanu's chest tightened as he read. This isn't just some artifact. It's a weapon, or worse. He scanned more of the documents, learning that the shard he found was one of 3 components required to activate the core. The other 2 pieces were missing. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint noise, a metallic clatter from somewhere above. His heart jumped as he realized he wasn't alone. The cat hissed softly, its ears flattened as it crouched low. Ren grabbed the shard and quickly stuffed it back into his jacket. He extinguished the lights on the computers, plunging the room into darkness, and pressed himself against the wall. Footsteps echoed faintly down the staircase, growing louder with each passing second. Ren glanced at the cat, which seemed ready to bolt. "Stay quiet," he whispered. His mind raced. Whoever was coming didn't seem like they were here for friendly conversation. And judging by the tech in this room, they likely knew about the shard, and maybe even that he had it. As the footsteps grew closer, Ren prepared himself for what was about to come. Whatever game he'd stumbled into, it was clear that leaving quietly wasn't going to be an option anymore. Ren pressed his back against the cold wall, his pulse pounding in his ears as the sound of footsteps echoed closer. Whoever was coming down the stairs wasn't trying to be subtle. They wanted him to know they were there. The cat crouched low beside him, its eyes locked on the doorway. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment there was silence. Ren held his breath, tightening his grip on the shard hidden in his jacket pocket. Suddenly, the door swung open, slamming against the wall. A beam of light swept across the room as 2 men stepped in, both dressed in black suits and carrying small firearms. "Clear this place quickly," one of them said in a clipped tone. His voice carried the authority of someone used to giving orders. "We're not leaving without the shard." Keanu's stomach tightened. They knew about the shard, and now they were here for it. He stayed perfectly still as the men scanned the room. Their flashlights darted over the equipment, lingering briefly on the corkboards and the broken pieces of the Sentinel core. One of them grunted, moving closer to the metal table in the center. "Looks like someone's already been here." Keanu's eyes flicked to the cat. It was still crouched beside him, but its tail twitched nervously. If they were caught, There was no telling how far these men would go to retrieve what they wanted. The first man leaned over the table, inspecting the shards. "It's not here. Someone's taken it," he growled. His partner moved toward the computers, examining the dark screens. "Check the area. Whoever has it might still be here." Keanu's mind raced. He needed a way out fast. His eyes darted toward the staircase behind the men. The only way past them was distraction. As if reading his mind, the cat suddenly bolted out of the shadows, knocking over a stack of metal tools with a loud clatter. "What the?" One of the men spun around, his flashlight tracking the noise. "It's just a cat," the second man muttered, lowering his weapon slightly. "Forget it and keep searching." But the distraction had worked. While their backs were turned, Ren slipped through the shadows and toward the staircase. He moved carefully, his breathing shallow, every step measured to avoid making noise. The cat, as if sensing his plan, darted back toward him and slipped past the men unnoticed. Ren reached the staircase and began his ascent, his heart pounding with every step. Just as he was about to reach the top, one of the men shouted, "Hey, someone's here." Without hesitation, Ren broke into a sprint, bursting through the door at the top of the stairs and into the main warehouse. The cat followed close on his heels, its movements quick and silent. Behind him, the sound of heavy boots echoed as the men gave chase. Ren weaved through the cluttered space, using the machinery and stacked crates as cover. He spotted a small window near the back of the warehouse and made a beeline for it. The cat leaped ahead, slipping through the narrow opening with ease. Ren followed, pulling himself through just as one of the men shouted, "Stop." Landing outside, Ren hit the ground running. The industrial zone's empty streets gave him little cover, but he zigzagged between abandoned buildings, trying to lose his pursuers. The cat darted ahead, its movements quick and purposeful, as if it knew exactly where to go. After what felt like an eternity, Ren found himself in a narrow alleyway, hidden behind a stack of rusted barrels. He crouched low, catching his breath, the shard clutched tightly in his hand. The cat sat beside him, its green eyes alert and scanning the surroundings. He stayed there for several minutes, listening for any sign of the men. When the streets finally fell silent, Ren exhaled shakily and leaned back against the wall. "That was way too close," he muttered, glancing at the cat. "You've got some serious instincts, you know that?" The cat meowed softly, almost as if it were acknowledging the compliment. Ren ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts racing. The men were clearly part of the same group that had parked outside his house the night before. Whoever they weren't going to stop until they got the shard. He pulled the map from his pocket, studying it again. The warehouse was only the first step. Whatever answers he needed were still out there, but the danger was growing with every move he made. Ren didn't have long to rest. He knew staying in one place too long was a risk. With the shard wrapped securely in its cloth and the map folded back into his jacket, he carefully left the alleyway. The cat followed close, trotting at his side as though it had been his partner for years. "We need a plan," Ren said quietly, more to himself than the cat. His first thought was to find a safe place to lay low and figure out his next move. The second was to get some answers about the shard before more men showed up. He stopped at a small cafe, ducking inside to grab a quick drink and a moment to think. The cat stayed outside, perched on the sidewalk and watching the street with laser focus. Ren sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the room for anything unusual. So far, everything seemed normal, but the tension in his chest didn't fade. As he exited the cafe, Ren noticed the cat suddenly dart across the street. He followed, frowning. What now? The cat led him toward a nondescript building with boarded-up windows. It pawed at the base of the door, mewing insistently. Ren hesitated. The building looked abandoned, but he'd learned to trust the cat's instincts. He pushed the door open, stepping inside. The space was dark, with only faint rays of light seeping through cracks in the boards. At first glance, it looked like another empty structure, but something felt off. The cat sprinted ahead, stopping in front of a trapdoor hidden beneath a layer of dust and debris. Ren crouched down, brushing away the grime to reveal the latch. "How do you keep finding these things?" he muttered, shaking his head. He opened the trapdoor and peered inside. A ladder led down into darkness. Without hesitation, the cat descended, and Ren followed, gripping the shard tightly. At the bottom he found a small room, its walls lined with old equipment and files similar to the ones he'd seen at the warehouse. But this time there was something more, a series of photographs pinned to the wall. Each photo showed a piece of the Sentinel core, including the shard he now carried. Scrawled notes surrounded the images, detailing locations and theories about its power. As Ren examined the notes, a cold realization hit him. This wasn't just about the shard or the core. There was a much bigger game at play, and he had just stepped into the middle of it. The sound of distant footsteps broke his thoughts. The chase wasn't over yet. Ren stood in the dimly lit room, his heart pounding as he scanned the photographs and notes pinned to the wall. Each piece of information painted a clearer picture of the Sentinel Core's significance. It wasn't just an ancient energy source. It was a potential weapon that could either stabilize global energy or unleash catastrophic destruction. The shard in his pocket was more valuable than he had imagined. The cat nudged his leg, its soft meow breaking his focus. "Yeah, I get it. We don't have much time," Ren muttered, glancing toward the trapdoor. Faint noises filtered through the silence. Footsteps. The men in black suits had tracked him here. Quickly, Ren grabbed a handful of the photographs and notes, stuffing them into his jacket along with the shard. He scanned the room for another exit and spotted a narrow ventilation shaft. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than confronting armed men head-on. "Let's move," he whispered to the cat. It jumped onto the table and leaped gracefully into the open vent. Ren followed, squeezing into the tight space as quietly as possible. The metallic clang of his boots echoed faintly, and he winced, hoping it wouldn't give them away. As they crawled through the vent, the sound of footsteps grew louder. Ren peered through the vent slits and saw the men entering the room below. One of them barked orders: "Spread out, find the shard, and whoever took it." The cat paused ahead, its ears twitching. It seemed to sense the danger just as keenly as Keanu. He whispered, "Keep going, buddy," and they pushed forward. The vent led to an abandoned stairwell, the grating loose and rusted. Ren pried it open and dropped down silently, catching the cat mid-jump. They descended the stairs quickly, the distant voices of the men echoing behind them. The building was old and labyrinthine, a maze of forgotten hallways and storage rooms. Ren darted through the corridors, his instincts guiding him as he searched for an exit. Just as they rounded a corner, a shadow loomed ahead. One of the men stepped into view, his weapon drawn. "Stop right there," he shouted, his voice cutting through the stale air. Ren froze, his mind racing. Then, without warning, the cat bolted forward, weaving between the man's legs and causing him to stumble. Seizing the moment, Ren lunged, knocking the weapon aside and landing a swift blow to the man's jaw. The assailant crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The cat returned to his side, its green eyes glinting as if it were proud of its contribution. "You're incredible," Ren muttered, catching his breath. He grabbed the fallen man's weapon and continued moving, every sense on high alert. Finally, they burst through a side door into the open air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the desolate streets. Ren scanned the area and spotted his car parked a few blocks away. "Almost there," he said, urging the cat to stay close. As they approached the car, the sound of engines roared in the distance. A black SUV appeared, speeding toward them. Keanu's pulse quickened as he realized there was no time to reach the car. He ducked into an alley, the cat following, and they disappeared into the back streets once again. Ren and the cat slipped through the maze of alleys, the distant hum of the SUV engines echoing behind them. The chase had grown more intense, and Ren knew the men wouldn't stop until they had the shard. They needed a plan, and fast. They found temporary shelter in an old storage building. It was quiet and dark, the perfect place to regroup. Ren leaned against the wall, catching his breath, while the cat paced back and forth, its tail flicking nervously. "Okay," Ren muttered, pulling out the shard and the documents he'd taken. "Let's figure out what we're dealing with." Among the papers was a blueprint of the Sentinel Core, showing how the shard fit into the larger mechanism. There were also notes about its origins, something about ancient energy harnessed by a now-forgotten civilization. But what caught Keanu's attention was a warning scrawled in bold letters. "Do not let it fall into their hands." The cat suddenly froze, its ears perked up. Ren followed its gaze to a small crack in the wall. Peeking through, he saw two of the suited men searching the nearby streets. "They're relentless," he whispered, tucking the shard back into his jacket. "We can't stay here." The cat meowed softly and moved toward a stack of crates near the back of the building. Ren watched as it pawed at a loose board, revealing a narrow tunnel. He crouched down and peered inside. It was tight but passable. "Seriously, how do you keep finding these things?" Ren asked, shaking his head. The cat gave him a look that almost felt smug before slipping into the tunnel. Ren followed, crawling through the cramped space until they emerged into another alley. The cat didn't stop there. It led Ren down a series of winding paths, past abandoned buildings and through overgrown lots. Each turn felt deliberate, as though the cat knew exactly where to go. Eventually, they arrived at a small, unmarked building tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. Wren hesitated. The building didn't look like much, just another rundown structure in an area full of them. But the cat sat by the door, staring at him expectantly. "All right, let's see what you've got," Wren said, pushing the door open. Inside, the air was stale, but the room was filled with old equipment and stacks of documents. It was another hideout, similar to the one beneath the warehouse. This time, however, the space felt more personal, as though someone had spent a lot of time here. Wren examined the room, finding more notes and schematics. One document caught his eye, a list of coordinates. 2 were already crossed out, but 1 remained, circled in red. It matched the location of the warehouse he'd just fled. Below the coordinates was a chilling phrase: "Piece 1 acquired." 2 more to go. Wren frowned, his grip tightening on the shard. The people chasing him weren't just after the shard he had, they were searching for the entire core. And judging by this list, they were dangerously close to finding it. The cat leaped onto the table, its eyes fixed on a specific note pinned to the wall. Wren followed its gaze and read the scribbled words. "The second piece is active. Location encrypted." Wren sighed, a mix of relief and frustration washing over him. "So the game's not over yet," he muttered, looking at the cat. "But at least we got a head start." The cat meowed softly, its tail curling around its legs. Wren gave it a small smile. "Looks like we're in this together." Wren stared at the notes scattered across the desk, the weight of the situation sinking in. The shard in his possession wasn't just a relic, it was the key to a powerful, world-altering energy source. Worse, the people after him already had 1 piece of the Sentinel core and were hunting for the 3rd. As he gathered the papers and tucked them into his jacket, a faint creak sounded behind him. He spun around, his instincts kicking in. A man stood in the doorway, his face partially shadowed, but Wren recognized him immediately. "Alan?" Wren said, surprised. Alan was an old acquaintance, someone he had worked with years ago on a security project. "What are you doing here?" Alan stepped into the room, a neutral expression on his face. "I could ask you the same thing, but I already know the answer." His eyes flicked to Keanu's jacket, where the shard was concealed. "You've got it, don't you?" Wren tensed. "How do you know about this?" Alan sighed, shaking his head. "You really stepped into something big this time, Keanu. The shard you're carrying isn't just a curiosity. It's a target. Hand it over, and I can make sure you walk away from this." Keanu's heart sank. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "You're working with them, aren't you?" Alan didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. "I've been tracking you since you left the warehouse. You've done well to stay ahead, but this ends now. I don't want to hurt you, but if you don't give me the shard, I'll have no choice." Keanu's grip tightened on the edge of the desk, his mind racing. "Alan, you don't know what this thing is capable of. If it falls into the wrong hands..." Alan cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You think you're the only one who understands the stakes. I've seen what the core can do. That's why I'm making sure it ends up where it belongs." Wren knew he couldn't reason with him. Without warning, he grabbed the nearest object, a heavy metal pipe, and swung it toward Alan's hand, knocking the device to the ground. Alan cursed and lunged at him, but Wren was quicker. He'd shoved the desk forward, creating a barrier between them. The cat, as if sensing the danger, leaped onto Alan's face, claws outstretched. Alan yelled, trying to shake it off, but the distraction gave Wren the chance to escape. He darted out of the room, the shard secure in his pocket, and sprinted down the hall. Behind him, he heard Alan shouting into a communicator. "He's on the move. Don't let him get away." Wren burst through the building's back door and into the streets. The cat followed close, its small frame surprisingly agile as it dodged obstacles. Wren spotted 2 black SUVs screeching to a halt nearby, armed men pouring out. He ducked into an alley, weaving through the labyrinth of back streets. His breath came in short gasps, his mind focused solely on staying ahead of his pursuers. The cat darted ahead, leading him through narrow gaps and hidden paths. Just when it felt like they might escape, a vehicle roared into view, cutting them off. Wren spun on his heel, ready to fight, but the cat bolted toward a stack of crates nearby. It knocked one over, causing a chain reaction that sent the heavy metal beam crashing down, blocking the path of the SUV. Wren took the opportunity to sprint into a nearby building, slamming the door behind him. Wren leaned against the door, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The building he had ducked into appeared to be an old library, its shelves covered in dust and its windows cracked. He moved deeper inside, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The cat trotted up to him, mewing softly as if to reassure him. "You're a lifesaver, you know that?" Ren muttered, giving it a quick scratch behind the ears. The shard in his pocket seemed to hum faintly, as if reacting to the tension around them. Ren found a quiet corner and pulled out the notes he had taken. Among them was a diagram showing how the shards fit together to form the Sentinel core. Each shard was unique, its lines and grooves designed to interlock perfectly. But there was something more, a faint glow on the paper, as though the shard's energy was activating hidden details. As Ren studied the notes, a phrase caught his attention. "The second piece is reactive to heat." He frowned, pulling out the shard and holding it carefully. Its glowing lines pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. He glanced at the cat. "Think this thing can lead us to the next piece." The cat blinked at him, then trotted off toward the back of the library. Ren followed, his boots crunching on the dusty floor. The cat led him to a section of the library that had clearly been undisturbed for years. Books were stacked haphazardly, and cobwebs draped over the shelves. Keanu's eyes landed on a peculiar device tucked between two books. It looked like a handheld scanner, its surface sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the dusty surroundings. He picked it up and noticed a small note attached, for locating energy signatures. Before he could test it, the faint sound of footsteps reached his ears. The men weren't far behind. Ren slipped the shard and scanner into his jacket and moved toward the back exit. The cat followed closely, its tail swishing nervously. As they stepped into the alley, Ren activated the scanner. A faint ping echoed, followed by a map lighting up on the device's small screen. It displayed a glowing marker not far from their location. "Looks like we got our next destination," Ren murmured. The cat meowed in agreement, and the two set off into the night. The chase wasn't over, but for the first time, Ren felt like he had a fighting chance. The shard was leading them somewhere important, and he was determined to stay one step ahead of the men hunting him. Ren Reeves moved swiftly through the quiet streets, clutching the scanner in one hand while keeping a wary eye on his surroundings. The cat trotted ahead, its sharp instincts guiding them toward the location marked on the device. The streets seemed empty, but Ren knew better. The men chasing him wouldn't stop. They were probably closing in even now. The scanner pulsed again, the glowing marker on the screen growing brighter. The coordinates led to a crumbling industrial building on the edge of town. Ren stopped outside, scanning the area. The building was silent, its windows shattered, and its walls covered in faded graffiti. "Looks abandoned," Ren muttered, "but we've seen this trick before, haven't we?" He glanced at the cat, which sat near the entrance, staring up at him. Its calm demeanor was strangely reassuring. Pushing the door open, Ren stepped inside, the cat following close behind. The air was thick with dust, and faint beams of moonlight streamed through the broken windows. The scanner in Keanu's hand beeped steadily, growing louder as he moved deeper into the building. As they reached the center of the structure, the scanner's beeping became rapid. Ren stopped in front of a large, rusted container. The cat leaped onto it, pawing at a seam near the top. "All right, let's see what you found this time," Ren said, prying the lid open. Inside, he found another shard. This one was larger than the one he already carried, its glowing lines more intricate. It pulsed faintly, almost in sync with the shard in his pocket. Ren carefully lifted it, feeling the same hum of energy that the first shard had given off. The cat meowed softly, drawing his attention. It wasn't looking at the shard, but at a series of markings on the container's interior. Ren crouched, studying them closely. They looked like coordinates, hastily etched into the metal. "Another location," Ren muttered, pulling out his phone to snap a picture. "This has to lead to the third piece." Before he could celebrate the discovery, a distant noise reached his ears. Engines. He moved to the nearest window and saw the familiar black SUVs pulling up outside. His stomach tightened. They had found him again. Ren quickly wrapped the new shard in a cloth and secured it in his jacket. He glanced at the cat, which seemed unbothered by the looming danger. "You've got nerves of steel, you know that?" he said, giving it a quick pat. Footsteps echoed through the building as the men entered, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Ren moved silently toward the back of the room, scanning for an escape route. The cat led the way, slipping through a gap in the wall that opened into an alley. Ren followed, the cold night air hitting him as he emerged outside. The cat darted ahead, guiding him through the maze of alleys and side streets. The sound of shouting grew fainter as they put more distance between themselves and the men. After several tense minutes, Ren finally stopped to catch his breath. He leaned against a wall, the new shard heavy in his pocket. 2 down, 1 to go, he murmured. The cat sat beside him, watching him with its unblinking green eyes. Ren pulled out the scanner again, checking the photo of the coordinates etched into the container. The location was further out, deep in the countryside. It would be a challenge to get there without being spotted, but he didn't have a choice. If the syndicate got the 3rd shard before he did, the consequences could be catastrophic. As he prepared to move again, the cat let out a low growl. Ren turned to see a shadow moving in the distance. He couldn't tell if it was one of the men or someone else, but he wasn't going to stick around to find out. "Let's go," he whispered, and the two disappeared into the night. Keanu's journey to the countryside was fraught with tension. Every car that passed, every shadow that moved, it all felt like a potential threat. The cat remained alert, its sharp eyes scanning their surroundings as they traveled. When they finally reached the coordinates, Ren found himself standing in front of an old farmhouse. It looked abandoned, its windows boarded up and its roof partially caved in. The scanner beat steadily in his hand, confirming that the final shard was nearby. "This has to be it," Ren said, stepping cautiously toward the house. The cat followed, its tail swishing as it sniffed the air. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Dust coated every surface, and the floorboards creaked under Keanu's weight. The scanner led him to the basement, where he found a large metal safe embedded in the wall. The scanner beeped furiously, signaling that the final shard was inside. Ren knelt in front of the safe, examining the lock. It required a code, but there was no time to guess. He reached for a small tool in his pocket, one he had taken from the previous hideout, and began working on the lock. Just as the lock clicked open, a voice echoed behind him. "Nice work, Reeves." Ren froze. Slowly, he turned to see Alan standing at the top of the stairs, flanked by 2 armed men. His former ally smirked, his weapon trained on Keanu. "I knew you'd lead us right to it. Thanks for saving us the trouble." Keanu's mind raced. The final shard was within reach, but so was the syndicate. The cat, perched on a nearby shelf, let out a low growl. Alan's eyes flicked to it, but he didn't seem to see it as a threat. "You don't know what you're doing, Alan," Ren said, trying to stall. "If they get all 3 shards, they'll destroy everything." Alan laughed. "You think I don't know that? I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for myself. Power like this doesn't come around every day." Ren knew he had only seconds to act. As Alan stepped closer, the cat sprang into action, leaping onto his face and clawing at his eyes. Alan yelled, stumbling backward. The distraction gave Ren the opening he needed. He grabbed the final shard from the safe and bolted up the stairs. The cat followed, its claws still extended. Alan's men gave chase, their footsteps pounding behind him. Ren burst through the farmhouse door, the cold night air hitting him like a wall. The chase was chaotic. Ren sprinted through the open fields, the shards in his pocket humming with energy. The cat darted ahead, guiding him toward a dense forest on the horizon. Bullets whizzed past, but Ren didn't stop. His focus was on escaping and protecting the shards at all costs. By the time they reached the safety of the trees, Ren was out of breath, his body aching from the exertion. He leaned against a tree, clutching the shards tightly. The cat sat beside him, its fur ruffled but its eyes still sharp. "We've got all 3, Ren said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now we just have to make sure no one can use them." The forest was silent, but Ren knew the syndicate wouldn't give up easily. The final battle was still ahead, and the stakes had never been higher. Keanu's feet pounded against the earth, the distant sound of his pursuers fading into the background as he dashed through the forest. The adrenaline surged through his veins, but his mind remained focused. The core, the 3 shards he now carried, was his responsibility. The stakes had never been higher, and the danger had never been more real, but Ren was determined. If he had to fight, he would fight. If he had to run, he would run. No matter what, he wouldn't let the syndicate have what they sought. The cat darted ahead, weaving effortlessly through the underbrush. Ren glanced down at his companion, its fur blending perfectly with the shadows. It had saved him more times than he could count, each time in ways he couldn't fully explain. There was something special about the cat, something far beyond its instinctual actions. Ren couldn't quite place it, but the bond between them was undeniable. As they continued their pursuit, Keanu's eyes scanned the terrain. The forest was dense here, trees growing close together with little space for open areas. The final destination, the location marked by the scanner, was still miles away, but Ren had learned to trust his instincts, and the device was pulling him toward it. Suddenly, the sound of breaking twigs and muffled voices pierced the quiet. The men had regrouped, and they were getting closer. Ren ducked into a dense thicket, pressing himself flat against the ground. He could hear them now, voices carrying through the trees. Where the hell did he go? Alan's voice rang out, his tone frustrated and angry. He can't have gotten far. Ren held his breath, praying they wouldn't spot him. The cat had already positioned itself at the edge of the thicket, watching the men silently. Ren could feel the weight of the shards in his jacket. His fingers tightened around the pieces. He couldn't afford to make a mistake now, not when everything was on the line. The minutes felt like hours. Keanu's thoughts raced, considering his options. He had already made it this far, but the syndicate wasn't about to give up without a fight. Alan's voice came through again, closed this time. "I'll take the north path," Alan said, his voice cold and resolute. "You two go around the other side. He's close. We'll flush him out." Keanu's heart sank. They had split up. He had moments, maybe minutes, to make a decision. He couldn't wait any longer. Taking a deep breath, he signaled to the cat, who silently bounded toward him. The two of them slipped through the underbrush, moving fast but staying low. The plan was simple: outsmart them. He needed to get out of the forest and make it to the next location before the syndicate could trap him. The cat's instincts were sharp, and it was already leading the way. Ren moved cautiously, keeping one ear trained for any sounds of pursuit. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard. As he emerged from the thicket, the first hint of dawn lightened the horizon. He could see the clearing ahead, a faint glow from the edge of the trees revealing the path leading to the next destination. A flash of movement caught Keanu's eye. He froze, instinctively pulling the cat close to his side. Another figure appeared, one of the syndicate men, coming from the other side of the clearing. Keanu's mind worked quickly. He had no time to go back into the forest. No time to retreat. There was only one way forward. He reached for his pistol, his fingers shaking slightly. The syndicate member hadn't noticed him yet. Keanu's breathing steadied as he calculated the distance. He couldn't risk a direct confrontation. The man would alert the others, and he couldn't afford to be outnumbered. The cat let out a low growl, its eyes narrowing as it moved silently toward the man. Ren nodded. "Go," he whispered. The cat sprinted ahead, making no sound as it darted across the clearing. It jumped at the man's legs, claws sinking into his calf. The man screamed, flailing and stumbling backward, losing his balance. That was all the distraction Ren needed. He sprinted toward the man, his pistol raised. A quick, well-aimed shot took the man out, hitting him square in the chest. Ren didn't stop. He kept running, the sound of the cat's paws keeping pace beside him. The cat's sharp instincts had given him the perfect opening, and now they had to keep moving. They made their way through the clearing and into the open fields beyond. The scanner pulsed again, guiding Ren toward a barn in the distance. It was an isolated building, but it had the perfect vantage point. If Ren could reach it, he might have a chance to regroup and plan his next move. But he wasn't in the clear yet. As he neared the barn, a roar of engines reached his ears. A black SUV had appeared on the horizon, tearing down the dirt road straight for him. The men were closing in, and Keanu's pulse quickened. He turned to look at the cat. "Stay close," he whispered, knowing the chase wasn't over. Ren sprinted toward the barn, using his speed and knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead. He didn't have much time. The SUV screeched to a halt at the entrance to the field, and Alan's voice rang out. "There, he's heading for the barn." Ren reached the barn's door, slamming it open and darting inside. The inside was dark and musty, but Ren knew it wouldn't provide much protection. He grabbed a nearby pitchfork and swung it to barricade the door as best as he could, using the time to take a breath. He wasn't safe yet, but he wasn't alone either. The cat had followed him inside, its body tense, its eyes fixed on the door. Keanu's fingers brushed the shards again, and his mind raced. This was it, the final stand. As the SUV screeched to a halt outside the barn, Ren heard the sound of boots hitting the dirt. Alan was close. "You can't run forever, Reeves," Alan shouted, his voice carrying through the walls of the barn. "Hand over the shards, and we'll make this quick." Ren gripped the pitchfork tightly, preparing himself. He couldn't afford to lose, not when everything was on the line. The syndicate had no idea what they were dealing with. They were after power, and Ren wasn't about to let them get their hands on it. The door rattled as one of the men tried to break through. Keanu's heart raced, but his resolve only hardened. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting the world from something too dangerous for anyone to control. The Sentinel Corps was too powerful. He turned to the cat. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low. The cat's eyes gleamed in the dim light, its body poised for action. With a sudden burst of motion, the door to the barn flew open. Two syndicate men rushed in, guns drawn. Ren was ready. He moved first, using the pitchfork to knock one of the men to the ground before delivering a swift kick to the other's chest. The man staggered back, falling into a stack of hay bales. The fight was chaotic. The cat attacked from behind, leaping onto one of the men's backs and clawing at his neck. Ren used every bit of his training, every ounce of strength, to stay ahead. He was fighting for more than just his life. He was fighting to protect the core and everything that depended on it. The barn was a battleground, but Ren kept his focus. As he took down the last of the men, he heard the screech of tires outside. Alan was coming. Ren wasn't going to wait. He grabbed the shards and bolted for the back door. There was no time to waste. Alan could still catch him, but this time, Ren wasn't running to escape. He was running to end it once and for all. The final showdown had arrived, and Ren was ready. This time, he would make sure that no one would ever be able to use the Sentinel core.